What's up, everybody? My name is Tori Franco. This is the What the World Needs podcast. I don't know what episode this is. I feel like every other episode, I know what episode I'm on, and then every other episode, I don't. So this is one of the episodes where I have no idea what episode I'm on. You would think I know, though. Anyway, in this episode, I wanted to, last episode I touched on a bit of religion, organized religion, and things like that, and just gave my general opinions on the entire subject. In this episode, I want to give more general information. In the next coming episodes, I want to give more specific stuff and do more research-based videos. I still don't know how the hell I'm gonna do it and how it's going to be structured or anything like that. But that's like the goal eventually. But right now I want to give like my thoughts on certain topics. This particular topic being the afterlife and where we go when we die, if we go somewhere. And I'd love to know what your thoughts are, because the idea of not having an afterlife and just ceasing to exist really gives me like serious anxiety. Like really badly, like where I feel kind of I don't even know, like it gives me this feeling of being like trapped in a weird way. I don't even know if that makes sense. But I was watching this TED talk earlier where I don't even remember the guy's name. I don't know if he was a neuroscientist or a philosopher or both, but he basically was saying how our consciousness is like a hallucination. What we perceive is basically a controlled hallucination that we all agree on. And because we all agree on it, we call it reality, basically. And he was saying that, you know, how the brain plays tricks on us, and how there are certain scientific experiments that show that the brain doesn't perfectly perceive things. Our brains don't perfectly perceive material things. There's one where they do a fake arm, and they're stroking at the same time. You can't see your real arm. You can see one of your arms, but you can't see the other one. It's out of your vision. And then in place of your arm that you can't see is a fake plastic arm. And what the experimenter does is takes a feather and tickles both the fake arm while you're looking at the fake arm and the real arm both at the same time. So you can feel it, but your brain is perceiving that you're feeling it through the fake arm, basically. And after some time, your brain can't make heads or tails of whether the fake arm is attached to you or not, basically. That and this experiment proves it, because then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, some guy comes with a knife and stabs the fake arm, and you see the experimentee pull his real arm away, as if like he's trying to protect his real appendage, when reality is the thing that was stabbed was the fake thing that was not attached to him. I hope it makes sense. I've heard of this experiment before, but what the guy was basically trying to say is our reality may not be what's truly out there. Because if you think about it, our brain, I like the way he put it too. He says our brain is enclosed in our skull. There's no windows. It can't see light, but the brain senses light. It can't physically see it because it's dark in our heads. And so he's saying, obviously, it makes the best guess as to what could be going on out here in the outside world. And basically what he says is, he talks about consciousness and how obviously you have to be alive to be conscious. And he talks about how he was under anesthesia, and he said, you know, I could have been out for 10 minutes, 10 years, 10 days, 10 seconds and I had no idea. I don't know where I went. It's just I was off. And he kind of, I guess he doesn't talk about death, but he says at the very end, and this like got me, at the very end he said, when consciousness ends, there is nothing to be afraid of. Literally nothing. Basically saying when we're dead, there's nothing. And that shook me. I watched all 17 minutes of this TED Talk and I was like fascinated. I'm like, yeah, our brains are so fascinating and this is amazing. And then all of a sudden he says, there is nothing to be afraid of because it's just nothing. And that literally put me into a friggin' panic attack because I was like, no, it can't. It can't be nothing. It could be nothing. Realistically, logically, reasonably speaking, yeah, it could just be that nothing happens, and just like we don't remember what life was, or we didn't experience life before we were born, we just go back to that. I don't like that idea. I understand that could be a possibility. I just don't like it. And then what really got me thinking, and it just continues to make me think, is like, well, what about all these psychic mediums that I've seen and have gotten so many things right in my life? How do they do what they do? And there are a lot of skeptics out there, and I would say I'm a skeptic in the sense that I question everything, but I'm not a skeptic in the sense that I'm not like an absolute skeptic where I question everything. I'm very philosophical. I've always been that way. I've always questioned my existence. Why are we here? What's our purpose? Is there a purpose? What are morals? Do they exist? All of this stuff. I've always been very philosophical, right? And now I'm reading all these philosophy books and I'm like, oh my God, like all these people for thousands of years have been questioning the same exact things and I had no idea about it. And I'm really into it, and I'm definitely I'm gonna be studying it in college and getting a degree. But what I'm trying to say is we have all these questions about what happens, and then there's all these things that can prove or disprove where we go after this life, if there is another life. And I'm still I've always thought about it, and then I kind of for years just was like, no, we go somewhere. Like I know for a fact that we go somewhere when we die. There is something on the other side. I feel my grandmother. I feel her presence. I have dreams about her. I get signals, I get signs, this medium was right. This medium guessed her name without even knowing me or who she was. You know what I mean? So there's so much that it's like, no, this proves that there is an afterlife. What about those stories you hear about those kids that remember their past lives? That has to prove something, but then it's like, well, how do we know those people aren't just lying? How do we know we're not being, I just don't know. I just don't know. The idea of not knowing isn't what scares me. I mean, it is scary, but that's not what scares me. It's the definitive, if the answer is nothing happens and this is it, there is no redoing anything. And it's a very finite answer. And I've always had this infinite view of the world where, we go on forever. And to kind of think about that possibly not being the case, it's a very scary thought. It is a very scary thought. And I don't know, I don't know, and I feel like I'm going right back to last week's episode, or the last episode, where literally in the entire episode I'm just like, well, I have no idea. Could be this, could be that. But I think that's the whole perplexing thing, is nobody truly knows, because you can't. physically ask somebody who has died, because they're dead. They don't exist in our physical world anymore. There are things that I want to believe that are comforting to me, and if those things are true, then I'm okay, and I'm accepting of the whole process. And this, I'm not trying to make this a very morbid episode. Like, that's not what I'm trying to do, but I definitely think that in figuring out what my beliefs are and in figuring out what's real and what's not, this question does definitely come up, you know? It's a big question. It's the whole basis of organized religion. You know, it's like, do good here so that when you pass away and you cease to exist in the physical world, you get to go to paradise and bask in the wonders of what heaven has to offer, whatever that may be. And I don't know, I used to think that I had it all figured out, but now I'm starting to realize I don't have anything figured out. What I believed to be true was just that. It was just beliefs. And there was no proof to it. It was just a belief, and it was real in my head, and it made sense in my head. But then I'm starting to think, like, did it make sense in my head because you wanted it to make sense? Because you want it to be real? And these thoughts are thoughts that give me anxiety. Like, literally, when that TED Talk ended, I was like shaken. I hadn't had anxiety about like death in a very long time. And it quickly, came, and then it quickly went. But it came, and I was like, well, then what? If this is the truth, then what? You know? And there are I feel like everything in this life is not concrete, if that makes sense. Even science is just not concrete. It's just not solid evidence, I guess you could say. It's not a fully, absolutely objective, because every so often new scientific discoveries are made that show, okay, we had it a little bit wrong here. This thing that we thought we had pinned down to a T, it's a little wrong. Do I feel like science is the best measure out there, at least for material stuff? Yeah, absolutely. It's the best explanation for the material world, the physical world. But do I know for certain that the physical world is all that exists? No, I don't. And when we think of how does consciousness work? Scientists have still yet to figure this out. And in this TED Talk, this guy says it. He says scientists have yet to figure out, how does consciousness work? We understand that our brain, it's obviously centered in the brain, and our brain does the thinking. We get that. But where do the thoughts come from? Because a dead brain doesn't think. So we have to be alive in order for these thoughts to come up. It's just, consciousness is it's very weird. It's a very different subject when you really, really think about it, what it is and how it works. It's very perplexing, even to scientists. Then you think about physics, quantum physics, and and the theory of relativity and gravity and all of these forces of the universe, we don't understand shit. In the grand scheme of things, we don't know anything. And I think physics and quantum physics, for some reason, and again, I don't know anything about any of these subjects. I am a lay person, have no idea about the intricacies of physics. I've never even taken a physics class or quantum physics or anything like that. And I just recently read 7 brief lessons in physics. It's like the very, very beginner's guide to physics, and like the 7 most important lessons in physics and the most influential lessons. And it's like, doesn't go into details about how. It just basically says, this is the what. Einstein came up with the theory of relativity, and then Newton came up with gravity and the forces of gravity, and then in time we kind of perfected these theories and these ideas with further experimentation. But basically the book says, like, it was a quick read too. It was very, very 1, 2, 3. I think it's like only 100 pages, but the book basically says that even with all of this knowledge, like, we still don't know shit. Basically, that's what the book says. And it's crazy when you think about it. You know, that we could be living in a multiverse. We could be living in a simulation. Like, that's a possibility. That when we die, it's like the game is literally over. It's like the Matrix. Like, when we die, we wake up from the simulation. We could be living in multiple dimensions. There are multiple dimensions, but like, what does that mean? Again, in the grand scheme of things, does that mean that, like, maybe heaven is not some like supernatural thing? Maybe heaven is just a different dimension that we go to. And I definitely think that physics and quantum physics is the closest to the supernatural. Like, it's the closest science that could probably explain supernatural things if we could just understand things better. And then I was watching another podcast episode. I'm telling you, this is literally all I've been doing, because I'm just like, I don't even know. I just have this insatiable desire to learn all this stuff. And this is how I know I need to go into philosophy and like study philosophy and do something with it, because I'm so interested in it. Even if I never get solid answers, I don't care. It's just the figuring things out and learning things along the way. It's awesome. But anyway, I was watching I was watching the Joe Rogan podcast, and he was talking to, I don't even know the guy's name, but he was obviously like a philosopher. You know, you could tell he studied philosophy in school. He used all these, you know, philosophical terms and these technical terms and things to describe certain situations and everything like that. And basically, I think he studied philosophy of science, which is very interesting. When you go into philosophy, you can it's not just philosophy like, who are we? Where do we come from? It's that, but you can study the philosophy of politics. You can study the philosophy of science. You can study the philosophy of mathematics and engineering. There's different, you could study the philosophy of sociology, the philosophy of psychology. So it's not just studying the fundamentals of the subject. So like, if you just study psychology, you'd be studying how to diagnose somebody and yada yada, the how. I think, if I'm not mistaken, studying the philosophy of the subject is studying like the why and the it's probably the how too, but like, it's just going more in depth. I feel that's my take on it. Haven't really done a lot of studying or researching on it, but now I will. But anyway, this person was on the podcast, and he was studying, I mean, he had a degree in philosophy of science. I'm almost 100% certain that's what his degree is in. And he was saying that randomness in our universe doesn't exist. That there is no such thing as randomness in our universe. That things that we perceive to be as random are only random because we can't wrap our brains around the intricate formula of how it happens. You know, it's just such an extensive formula to figure out exactly how it happens to be able to predict it, that we just say, oh, it's random, if that makes sense. And that threw me too, that idea that nothing in the universe is random, that everything is calculated in some way, whether it's in a simple way, 2 + 2 = 4, or in a very complex way, i.e. the theory of general relativity, whatever the fuck that even is. Excuse my French, I apologize. I'm trying not to curse as much as I do. I'm working on it. Definitely working on it. Anyway, so this idea that nothing is random, to me is very, it's a profound thing in my head, because that could say a lot about not necessarily a creator, but in my head maybe a purpose of the universe, or a purpose of things, or I don't know why that's significant to me on a spiritual level, but it is. And I'm not trying to, it's crazy because the more I dive into all of this stuff, the more I learn, which I love to do. But then it's like the more I learn, the more I question things too. And I'm at this point faced, especially after watching this podcast episode and like really being affected by that last statement that was made, thinking to myself like, oh my God, do I really want to continue to like do all this research, do all this reading, ask questions? And then I'm stuck between, well, do I want to just put my head in the sand for the rest of my life for the sake of not having anxiety for knowing the truth, or potentially what the truth could be? Or do I want to learn as much as I possibly can and try and understand things? And whatever the truth is, sometimes the truth hurts, sometimes the truth is scary, but whatever the truth is, at least I know what it is, you know? So I'm stuck between this dynamic, and I'm going to choose to go the way of, I'm not going to stop learning because I'm afraid of what I may or may not know or learn or come to believe. I believe in energy. I believe, well, I mean, everything is energy. That's, again, scientifically proven. I believe that energy of the universe is within us, and that could mean that when we pass away and cease to exist in this world, that energy does not, because energy can't be created or destroyed. It just is. It always is. It always will be. It is everywhere, which kind of also sounds like the definition of God to me. If you look at in the Bible and look at what the definition of God is, that's always perplexed me. It's this idea that we are all made up of the same stuff in the image of God, if you subscribe to the Bible. But then also, if you're a physicist or something like that, you would agree that we are all made up of the same stuff, energy. And that's also what the universe is made up of and consists of. So it's kind of, if you really think about it, the Bible and science say the same thing, but in a different way, if that makes sense. And I'm not trying to say that the Bible is scientific. Don't get me wrong. The Bible, like I said last episode, I do not subscribe to the Bible. What I am saying is they're saying two separate things that are the same. So the Bible equates this all-powerful, all-knowing being that is ever existent, ever present, and everywhere. That's literally the same thing. To God. Whereas if you ask a physicist, I think it's physics, what energy is, it is basically the power of the universe. It's what makes up the universe and all of us. We are made in the image of God. You know what I mean? So it's similar. But obviously a physicist will tell you, well, that's just energy. That's just the universe. And a theologian will say, well, that's just God. You know? Obviously, physicists prove and can prove the energy, whereas a theologian cannot scientifically prove this being. That's what I'm trying to say. And I'm not trying to be controversial at all. I'm just trying to really work out my own thoughts here, but also make other people, whoever is listening or whoever is watching, think about this stuff. Because it does shake you. These questions shake us. At least me. I'm very, very moved and scared of these questions. I'm afraid to know the truth. Basically, I'm just afraid of finding out that everything that I believe to be true in my heart and my soul isn't true. And that idea is scary. That's a scary idea, especially when your beliefs are what basically support you and keep you from your faith in whatever it is, in your spirituality, in your religion. That's what keeps you going. You know? What if everything that I've read up on up to now is just BS? It's scary. It's a scary thought. And I'm in this place where I can't say whether it's BS or not. I love my beliefs and I love what I believe, and what I believe is different, and what I believe kind of has some science to it, but also has some spirituality, and I'm a very spiritual person. And I take pride in being that way, and in being different, and being, in my brain, in my heart, a free thinker, you know, not conforming to the norms of organized religion. And I'm not a Catholic, I'm not a Christian, I'm not any of that. There's no label for what I believe. I'm outside that box. And I've always loved being that way. And I've always genuinely felt that what I believe is truth. And to consider that it's a possibility that it may not be is just scary to me. It's just scary. Because I want so badly for what I believe to be the true thing. You know? I want so badly for what I've known to be true in my heart to be actually the truth. And when I tell you, when I even just wrapped my brain around this idea that when we cease to exist, we cease to exist. That's it. Nothing happens. When I just even when I even tried to just wrap my brain around that and rationalize it and think for a second, like, damn, that could be it. That's one of the possibilities. It scared the shit out of me. And I didn't like it. I did not like it at all. But then I thought also, you know what? If that is the case, then all that really means is that while we are here, we just have to make the best of this. Do I feel as though... they're setting off fireworks outside. I don't know if you can hear it, but it sounds like we're being fucking bombed. The hell? Holy crap. Anyway, completely lost my train of thought. Again, I apologize for cursing. Damn it. I'm keeping track too. I've cursed 3 times so far in this episode. What was I saying? When I think about do I believe, obviously, am I 100% a believer that when we die nothing happens? No, I'm not. Honestly. Because there are still things to me that I'm like, well, what about this? To me, that's proof that we go somewhere. And what about this? And what about that? What about psychics? And what about mediums? And what about dreams that I've had? And what about all these things that prove that we have a soul? You know, science can't prove why. I don't think science can prove with exact objectivity where personality comes from. I mean, genetics obviously plays a factor, and environment. Maybe that's just it. I don't know. All of these things, and I'm not trying to sound like an idiot. I'm really not. But all of these things that I am genuinely ignorant on, you know, I'm not a scientist. I'm not a biologist. I should probably be asking Alexis. Maybe I'll bring it up again next time we do an episode together, which will be coming very shortly. To my knowledge, which again is very, 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 very minuscule when it comes to science. You know, I took obviously science in school, biology in school, and all the sciences in high school and everything like that. And then in college, I took biology. So I have a very elementary knowledge on science. And obviously, the further I get in my education, the more I hope to know at least a little bit more about science and what makes this and what makes that. You know, I'm definitely going to take more science classes. But as far as I know, I mean, it's the whole reason why we have all of these other avenues of study. You know, if science was end all be all when it comes to the human personality and the human condition, if genetics and our biological environments were the end all be all, then we wouldn't need psychology, right? Then what the hell is psychology? It's the study of the mind. Well, that obviously is proof that the mind and the body are separate. And I'm literally, again, just trying to work all this out in my head. I'm giving myself a friggin' headache doing it. But to me, it's like, that's my rationale. And I may, again, with my lack of knowledge and my lack of education on the subject, I could literally be absolutely wrong. Like, completely and utterly just blind to the whole thing. But in my head, it makes sense that obviously psychology is like basically the study of the mind. Obviously, a little bit goes into how the brain works too. So it's the brain and the mind. Okay, so the brain and the mind are connected, but the mind is still outside of the brain, as far as I know. And do we each have one mind separately of each other? Or do we share the same mind? Because I've heard this theory before where mass consciousness and certain experiments have been done to show that mass consciousness exists. Even in animals, according to certain things that I've seen. And then I start to think, well, can I really trust a YouTube video? If that's the case, then all these flat earthers who believe that the earth is flat could potentially be right. And in my head, it's like, well, that doesn't seem right. But does it not seem right that the earth could be flat? Because I just want to believe that the earth is a sphere, because if the earth is a sphere and we're flying through space, then that means that space exists, and that means that there's a vast universe out there that goes way beyond any of our understanding, which then to me means that an afterlife could exist. If space is never ending and it's infinite, and there's an infinite number of universes and an infinite number of galaxies, then that means that there's life in other places and different dimensions and black holes and all of this stuff. If the earth was flat, none of that would exist. And if none of that existed, then physics would literally just basically go to shit. It's literally, this is literally, I'm giving you a little taste of my thought process on this entire situation. I may sound crazy, but I'm really just questioning. That's it. I'm just questioning. How does life happen? Not like life, like biological life. Like, I mean life in general. Because again, to my knowledge, we know how this universe started, but where did life come from? I just want to literally sit down with somebody, like a physicist or a biologist or both, and just pick their brain. What do you know? What do you know in layman's terms? What do you know that you can tell me without pushing your beliefs onto me or trying to make me believe something that isn't true, that isn't real? What do you know as a fact? I never realized how much physics and science and all of these things actually go hand in hand with philosophy. And it actually makes sense, because all of these subjects explain how our physical world came to be and our physical lives came to be. But there's so much that's unexplained. And I wanted to sit down and do this. This is so, like, when I say I watched that TED Talk, I literally watched the TED Talk, I would say maybe 3 hours ago, and kind of just sat, I read a little bit and watched a couple videos, and then I thought about it a little bit more, and I didn't have anxiety. I did not have anxiety, but I thought about it, and I was like, I'm going to talk about that. And it all, when we think about it, it just all ties in. There are so many cross references when it comes to the Bible and all these other spiritual texts, which basically tells me that not one spiritual text is absolutely, again, objectively true, but that each text has something in it that we can take from it regarding the spiritual world and spirituality, and we can put all the pieces together. But at this point, everything is just a puzzle. It's just a puzzle that we have some of the pieces, but we have yet to even find all the pieces in order to be able to put them all together. You know, take a 100-piece puzzle. Life is literally a 100-piece puzzle where you only have 50 of the pieces, and the rest of the other 50 you still have to find. That's life in an analogy, as far as our knowledge and what we know to be true. And even those 50 puzzle pieces that we definitely have, they may not be the real puzzle pieces that go to that same puzzle that we're trying to put together. They kind of fit. Things kind of make sense, but it's not 100%. Nobody knows. And it's crazy because when we really think of this one idea that nobody knows anything 150% objectively, you know, the theologian, the Christian, the Catholic, the Muslim, the Buddhist doesn't know any more or any less than the physicist and the biologist. You know, in my head, when it comes to like philosophically, nobody knows more than anybody else. As far as where we come from, where we're going, we don't know. We just know what is. And even then, we don't really know. It's crazy when you think about it. But that idea that nobody knows anything could literally stop people from fighting and maybe just have conversations with one another, where two people who have opposing views or opposing beliefs on what they believe to be true, whether it's theology or biology, two people can sit down and have an educated, somewhat intellectual conversation without telling the other person to F off, because they both respect the fact that nobody has the real true answer 150%. So this idea that we know nothing, to me, is scary, but at the same time, when it comes to people, a little comforting. And if we could all just walk into conversations with that mind state that nobody knows anything 150% to be 150% true, or completely, absolutely, objectively true, then what the hell are we all fighting about? That's the cause of all these fights, is I know my president is the best. Well, I know that my president is the worst, and these are the reasons why. Is everything in life subjective? It's just according to our own perception of it. Is that the case? I don't know. But when it comes to where we go after this, all I could say is, I friggin' hope. I hope we go somewhere. I hope we do. That's really it. That's all I gotta say about that. I hope, if you're listening, that you've gotten some insight from this word vomit, thought diarrhea of an episode. Let me know what you think, what you believe. I'm always open to hearing different beliefs and different ideas. let me know, because I'm very receptive to different things. Anyway, I'm going to get out of here now. This is the What the World Needs podcast. My name is Tori Franco. If you didn't already, go check out the episode that I did before this one, where I kind of talk about religion and beliefs and everything like that. This is maybe kind of a continuation of that in a way. I don't know. My next episode, I want to talk about meditation and kind of go into that a little bit. Hopefully I'll have Alexis on here with me to talk about it too. So I'm hoping that's the next episode. Got to figure out her schedule, and hopefully it coincides with mine and we can do the damn thing. But anyway, my name is Tori Franco. This is another episode of the What the World Needs podcast. I'll catch you guys in the next episode. Until next time, stay real, stay smiling, stay wonderful, stay faithful, maybe, in whatever the hell it is you believe. Peace out, everybody.